Hello, everyone. Welcome to CODA's Plugging Away podcast, where we aim to provide you with in-depth discussions and insights into the world of oil and gas decommissioning. My name is Shaun Sadler. I'm the General Manager here at CODA. And today, we're going to be talking about the challenges and opportunities of waste management, specifically management of waste streams arising from decommissioning. We want to do this because responsible and sustainable management of waste is often seen as one of the biggest challenges facing the industry sector here in Australia. So it's really timely for us to ask, why is that? And why do opinions vary so much about the nature or even the existence of the waste management challenge? So to discuss this, I'm delighted to introduce CODA's resident waste management expert, Kim Horwood. Hello, Kim.
Hi, Shaun. Thank you for having me.
So by way of introduction, Kim's got over 20 years of global experience in environmental regulation for oil and gas across LNG facilities, major projects, supply bases, drilling, and exploration. Kim, you've managed over 20 large waste contracts, led waste facility assurance programs, and contributed to decommissioning projects and ship disposals. Kim currently audits waste facilities for major clients, offering expert assurance, environmental guidance, and circular economy advice. So very welcome, Kim. So maybe we should start the discussion by talking about the definition of waste. We love to get ahead of ourselves in these conversations, think about recycling, waste destinations. But first, let's agree what constitutes waste in the decommissioning context. So welcome your thoughts on that one, Kim.
It's a prickly one. There's black and white answers, and if you read black and white from a federal versus a state government regulation, they vary from state to state. So generally speaking, if it is a surplus to your needs and wants and something or a material is no longer going to be used, it is a waste. If you are going to continue to use it by cleaning it, regenerating it, and using it in the same manner as it was used before, it's definitely not a waste. However, each regulator has a slightly different take on it and a slightly different view.
Now, I think we'll come back to that legislative overprint in a little while, but it's interesting because when we talk about decommissioning waste, we often jump first to the thinking about metals, but there's a wide range of different waste streams coming out of decommissioning, and some are clearly going to be more challenging to deal with than others. Now, you and I recently ran a waste management workshop here in CODA, and the participants identified a wide range of different waste streams. Some things I knew about and lots of things I didn't. And again, were you surprised by anything that you saw on the list that came out?
I think I was surprised because I thought plastics and steels would just be the overwhelming response from everybody. We all have built facilities that are primarily plastic and steel. But living quarters, how was that one? Furniture, stuff that we would have thought is natural if we are managing waste on a day-to-day basis. Any LNG plant or any oil and gas company will have about 360 waste streams. So you would expect to see that volume. I didn't see much mercury and norms. Did you see? PFAS was a huge one. And that one we should be seeing more and more of as people become aware of. Hydrocarbons. Everybody wanted hydrocarbons and chemicals. And I think that one has never shocked me because we are going to be seeing chemicals. We're going to see the ship's tanks. You're going to see ballast waters, marine growth, GRE, piping, coal seam gas and gathering water, which is from the other side of our country, the glycols. So liquid waste, I was very glad to see feature because that is one that we tend to see getting put into evaporation ponds, mixed with fixation and put into landfills. So it's a good one that they are noticing it and worrying about it.
Yeah, I think that what really came out for me was that focus, particularly on waste liquids, which again is not something I guess talked about a lot, but it's not one of the more obvious waste streams, but it's clearly front and center for most people when they're thinking about what's going to be coming out of the process of decommissioning and decontamination. We also had some entries of things like oily rags, which I found quite remarkable. It's not something I would ever have thought about, but it was interesting to see it there.
It's actually traditionally one of the hardest waste streams to actually manage and get hold of. You've got to bleed them and clean them if you want to put them in most waste landfills. many waste landfills won't accept them. So they traditionally are very hard waste. Salt is also going to be quite a high one from the East Coast.
So really interesting diversity of waste streams that the industry is going to have to deal with. Now, in my opinion, one of the reasons that waste management is considered an issue could be the apparent lack of a clearly identifiable, scale-connected supply chain, particularly for certain problematic waste streams. But this is a complicated area. We get multiple types of feedback from industry. Some people say, listen, I'm doing this work, I'm generating this waste, and I simply don't know where to turn. Other people have clearly developed this pretty robust but local pathways for waste management. Well, they may be geographically restricted, and there does seem to be a broad geographical disparity in the size and distribution of supply chains and markets for managing recyclate. Is that a reasonable assessment, that complicated overview? And is it reasonable, my assumption, that these supply chains don't exist on a national basis?
The supply chain, in some ways, is there. It's connecting the dots. And there's a lot of rogue brokers and people that are involved in this industry. Traditionally, waste has been something that has literally been sweep it under the carpet and don't see it. Once I've forgotten about it, I've forgotten about it. That's allowed quite a rogue industry to prevail. That's allowed mummy and daddy trucks, is what I call the operators. It's allowed a lot of waste operators and people who are entrepreneurial but rogue and mafia. There is a mafia element to this to take over. And that's causing the complications with the supply chain. So are there actually issues? Potentially, yes, there are, because of that rogue element, but there are solutions. It's just that you have to know where to go and how to find them. You're 100% correct about the geographical location. 33% or around there is in Melbourne and Sydney. So most of our waste locations are, about 60% in total, are down at the bottom of our country. South Australia has a big portion of our waste economy. Here in WA, we probably have a far smaller, diverse set of waste facilities. And when you start to look in Queensland and in the Northern Territory, the number drops again. So if you want to look across Australia, I think just looking at the database I'm pulling together, and last night I was going through the 2022 DQ data that we have, I found even then that gaps was absolutely disparate, and there was a lot of waste facilities that haven't been included. A lot of them are closed when I was going through them. And many of them are too small in actual principle to be able to handle the waste. And a lot of the facilities talk a big game. So they're not actually able to produce and manage the waste. And the decommissioning wave is going to come and is going to hit us pretty hard. So we need to be, like you say, I completely agree. We need to have hubs set up where we can transfer, we can consolidate, we can manage the nasty stuff properly, and we can be moving things in bulk so we can use economies of scale to be able to facilitate movement to the correct facilities. And they can then accept it as and bleed it through their systems and processes in a way that is non-constraintive and assists them in being able to do a great job and make money out of it, because margins in waste are low. Nobody includes waste in the front end of their project for their budget.
Now, it's interesting that you describe that, again, quite complex, variable and spatially variable nature of the supply chains. But I think there's more there than somebody like myself who doesn't necessarily have a background in waste management at all would assume. And that's why, when I started this part of the conversation, I wanted to make it clear and give a shout out to the people who are making real efforts at the moment and having to find solutions at the moment, because decommissioning is happening right now and offshore materials are coming onshore. And, CODA partner organizations are working really hard to try and make this happen and make it a reality. And I just wanted to acknowledge the efforts that are being made. But at the same time, it's now even more important for us to do the work that you are doing in terms of painting the picture of where those facilities are, what the capacities are, and what the options are for the industry to use that network as it currently exists.
I could not agree more. And we do. We have some great suppliers in the entire chain. And if we do it badly, the whole news finds out, everybody finds out, and it's reputation damaging for the waste operator and for the company. So it has to be done correctly. And even sometimes where you have the rogue operators, whether they are rogue or whether they're unintentionally rogue, they just don't know the regulations. Some of these regulators are really hard to get hold of. I've been in this game for well and truly 20 years, and I was a regulator. I still battle to get hold of some of them. And moving from state to state, waste codes change, how we call a hazardous waste changes. So it's a controlled waste, it's a prescribed waste, it's a listed waste. It changes from state to state. And that also changes the dynamic as a waste generator that if you're not aware of, you can, how do you put that nicely? You can have the mickey taken out of you.
Taken less seriously.
Taken less seriously, or they also, if you're not understand of all the pitfalls, the waste contracting companies or waste companies can, or supply chains can actually take advantage of that. And we often see that in the waste world, where the waste management contractors will take a waste from a generator, they'll falsify the actual characterization of it, and then they'll give it to waste, file it under the right waste code, but not give you the actual characteristics and constituents, and give it to a waste facility. Waste facilities are designed just like an LNG plant is, just like any other plant. They've got a very, very specific feed in, a very, very specific feed out. It doesn't matter what the process is, they can only accept a different type of waste at that particular chemical characterization or product, shape or form. And it's really important that it all gets done properly. And they've all got a license to accept waste in a certain variable.
That's it. And again, that's a perfect segue into something else that always comes to the fore as soon as we start to talk about waste management. And that's liability and accountability. Who holds the accountability for disposing of waste, and where's that liability transition from one party to the next? And discussions around this are always complicated by the contracting overprint, particularly the use of things like EPRD contracts, which have the effect of cascading the requirement to manage waste into the supply chain. But does it also cascade the accountability or liability? Or where does that change?
What's one of the greatest questions that we're ever going to see, and something that we used to put forward to every lawyer that I've ever worked at my every company, and those are some of the biggest oil and gas houses in global, that changes, and that liability is just not black and white. It's not there. I think what is black and white is the waste generator is responsible for your waste to make sure that it gets disposed of responsibly in a lawful place. Is Australian. When you start to go to America and in Europe, and that's why you'll see the global houses acting a bit differently in their waste management with their waste assurance, there have been multiple ongoing cases. We call them the Superfund cases, where waste facilities are closed down, shut down, fined for whatever reason, and the waste generator ends up paying the cost. So most companies on the bigger scale, they know that, and so they end up watching their liability. It's mine, and I just want it to be blended, and I want it to be managed properly. You'll see all the big houses, and that's where I'm doing all my audits. The Australian companies, we're yet to get there. I truly believe in the last 20 years, I have seen regulators picking up trails and following courses all the way down to the waste generator, which we then are seeing a stronger finding and stronger infringements on the facilities. Does that impact the bottom line of some of these waste contractors? Because it doesn't seem to really impact on them getting contracts or not is another question to ask. But most definitely, liability, without a doubt, starts at the waste generator, and it's you to see it at your lawful place. At that lawful place, is very, very black and white, and it's all based on case law. We haven't had that case law in Australia to date.
Yeah, it's interesting, and we talked both now and in the workshop we had the other week about this concept of the point of blending, and that really hit home for me in terms of helping me to understand that's the point at which the liability can transfer or can change, because it's no longer recognizable as something which was the original product, basically, and that's that's how I came to understand it, at least.
I don't know if the liability cleanses. So if you're in France, and I think it's Germany, so that the European Union have now put in place the EU Supply Chain Directive. That changes a lot of things. That changes the goals. Now, if you're in those kind of countries, anybody in your supply chain and your own waste generation, you have to go molecule to molecule, molecule to graveyard. There's no more point of blend in those countries. And if your product is getting shipped through France, you're going to be liable in your global supply chain in that space. And that's why they are doing that particular directive. In Australia, that still is yet to filtrate and come into any sort of legislation. But from a company's perspective, definitely if you have a drum and it's got your label on it and it's sitting there, well, we actually know whose that is. If you have put it into a tank and it has been blended and changed, at that point, it changes chemical characteristics. It still hasn't been used, but we've got a lot of fuel blending facilities and a lot of consolidation facilities. At that, your liability is better off than some of the companies that I work for will go down to the next level and go, you blend it. Can I talk about my favorite blending facility? Is called there's GeoCycle, where she has a blending facility and a super blender in Victoria, and then they ship off their waste to a bunch of waste transfer stations. Another one is GRR in Darwin. They take your waste, they heat it up, they extract it, same as Northern Oil and Southern Oil, their oils, and then they put it through their evaporators, their centrifuges, and it's processed back into a product. So at that point, you know that you are no longer liable. But you put it into a landfill, where does the liability stop and end? It just is very, very tough. That's why TELUS has taken huge amounts of effort to try and say we bought it. And then they've got a massive, long, ongoing legacy. Is that 100% foolproof? I don't know.
It's really interesting that, again, we've touched on it again, the differences in jurisdiction and the legislation that goes alongside it. That really is another thing that the industry is going to struggle with, navigating the requirements of prevailing legislation. We see multiple layers from international, national, state-based. They're all a little bit different. They all need to be navigated. Do you think there's any particular strategy or approach that organizations can take that improves their ability to manage the legislation and regulatory requirements?
I always feel that if you are looking at what are the guiding principles, the UN SDGs, United Nations Sustainability Development Goals, and you are looking at your countries and your nations' national plans and national action plans, that's what guides the legislation. So if you can be ahead of it, and we are seeing Australia's legislations changing quite a lot, that's the best way to be. We're currently seeing a lot of the companies, especially the major houses, are going into the circularity and they're putting in quite bigger KPIs to be able to prevent that. And that's definitely where you go. If you're sitting managing it where we know we're going into a recycling world, we know we're going into a circular economy world, put your KPI in. But I thought what I found interesting in that workshop was some of the more senior managers and the people who are driving these projects. Engineering speakers, we want to have a target. We want to know what we can clean to, what we can manage our waste to, so that these companies can take it. And I felt like that was something that the oil and gas operators just want. They want a standard set of rules and targets. This is how clean the steel has to be. This is how clean the plastic has to be. And this is how clean everything has to be. And that would be really easy. Unfortunately, that is a quagmire of a landmine of hardness. And the only way we can overcome that is if we have a proper project management, where, like in the UK, where it comes in and we have decommissioning centres where they can manage it project by project, and then it gets cleaned so that it leaves to go to certain areas.
Yeah, it's interesting, and there you alluded against something which, you know, is more into the future. We don't have dedicated decommissioning ports or centres in Australia at this time. You know, we'll be looking in the next few years as more and more of this comes offshore to adapt the abilities of the ports that currently exist. But again, you know, we're looking to the future. Decommissioning is well underway. Waste streams are being generated. Companies are having to find solutions on the basis of the markets and supply chains that currently exist. In some cases, that involves sending materials into overseas markets rather than into the Australian market. Is that a sustainable approach? Is that something that can go and continue, or, you know, is there any one thing that both industry and government should be focusing on that would materially change the game and improve it for waste management?
100%. The regulator needs to accept and almost enforce, advocate and regulate the recycling market. It needs to provide a market that's strong, which makes it so that it's financially feasible to recycle and to put this huge, vast amount of product back into circulation. And until they are aiding that process, both legally and financially, for the entire industry, I don't know when it's going to become stock standard approach. We do have a lot of waste, and we're still very new in our resource sector compared to overseas. I believe we're going to see it's not going away, this problem. So the regulator needs to have a good look at it. The regulator also needs to understand that whilst we've got a huge volume of space, going and building more landfills is not the solution, because we're going to be putting in more wind turbines, more solar panels. There's so many more that we don't want to go to landfill. We need to be looking at how we can cost effectively and competitively put more facilities together so that a lot of this waste can help more people. It's a really great economy.
Yeah, I think there's real opportunity to help do something slightly different going forward. There's opportunity both for industry. Industry recognizes this, I believe, and is trying to shape itself to grasp that opportunity, you know, to do something constructive with the waste that's coming out of decommissioning, and to be seen to be doing that. But there's really also opportunity for governments to work with industry and to co-invest in facilities and areas that allow industry to do this in the most responsible and sustainable manner. So yeah, I think there's big opportunity space. It's up to us to sort of position ourselves to take that chance and step into it.
I think it'll be amazing if we start to see government really listening and grasping on the actual opportunity that is available to us. In science, we've often seen in waste, over the last 10, 20 years, we've started to see people wanting to recycle, facilities open, and we are not aware of some of the chemicals and some of the long-term environmental impacts. When we say, yes, we can put certain products in compost, for instance, government says, yes, they ticket approval, you get a license, and all of a sudden we realize that paints and some other products are really, really bad for the environment, or PFAS is infested with 90% of the things that we use and own. So it ends up in our compost and it ends up in our foods. That's a great example, as the PFAS example. So the regulator, if they are able to help us at source, if they're able to help and boost that economy done in a very mindful and strategic manner, it can only help us. But it has to be done really, really thoughtfully, because the regulator needs to be very aware that, and they are aware that some people live in remote play facilities, that there's a farm somewhere and your waste can end up on that farm. And that happens a lot. So it really needs to be a collaboration of everybody working together with a lot of disclosure, which we don't like in the operators world. And the waste companies traditionally are not great at collaborating. They're quite bullish with each other. And they'll thrust each other out of business quite quickly. So that's something that the government also needs to be very aware of. In my experience, a lot of these smaller companies are people who are highly skilled, highly technically trained, and very, very passionate. So the government needs to be able to enable those companies to grow, to survive. They don't have time for marketing. You know, a lot of the facilities that I know, they have no idea how to reach the operator because they're blocked by a lot of different forces. So if the government can help that, the government can offer platforms like CODA. This is why I love CODA. It's a great platform that we can help join these waste facilities and these entrepreneurs who are running families. These plants have got 30 to 40 employees, sometimes only 15. And those 15 people have a family in a small town or a big city. And they provide diversity. They provide a different way of thinking. They provide great opportunity for us in the decommissioning space to manage our waste differently.
I think that's everything you've just talked about, really emphasizes the importance of the work that you're doing at the moment with CODA. We're not necessarily going to tell people things they didn't know. We will in some cases. But the people working in the industry are smart and they know what's going on around them. But we're trying to pull the curtains back a little bit and give everybody a broad overview of what this looks like. And also sort of give opportunity to both industry and to governments to say, well, here's an opportunity to change how this works and change it for the better, or just make it more appealing to people in terms of getting involved in this, because the more people we can get actively involved in the right way, safely and sustainably, the better.
Could not agree more. And the more people who are on board, the better the outcome. So I could not agree better more. But I do feel those people in industry, we were both there, Shaun. You work hard, you don't have time, and you've got massive deadlines. You want to do more. And a lot of them are passionate, but I have no idea how. There's only a few oil and gas houses who had me. And at my company, we had a few of us, but there was only a few of us internationally or globally. But if without that and your time commitments and your time poor, how do you manage to go through? And I think last night I was saying I downloaded the steel facilities from a DQ database and I had my own. I've looked at about 200 on there. And I started going through them on the internet and from my own knowledge. How many of those are some little facility that would never ever exist and won't be able to take any of the decommissioning waste, but how many of them have got the ability to take them and they just don't know the decommissioning waste is coming? So if we can give that database kind of slimmed down, and it is going to be dynamic, because as we grow, we're going to do it. Facilities close all the time. The bigger waste management companies are great at acquiring companies, so whether that's to get them out of competition or to use that as an extra arm in their company, it's a great opportunity, but we need to be able to capture for the operator what is going on, whether they are illegal. Remember, you've been sending me a few emails. Have you seen these companies? Have you seen these companies? They don't even exist. I've emailed all of them, haven't I? We haven't heard a response from them. Some of them are brokers. So we know, and I was looking at 4 of them. They're all brokers for hydrocarbon waste. And they charge an additional $60,000 just for transport. So the waste economics is vastly exaggerated. You can pay $1 if you go directly through to a waste facility, $3 if you go via a waste contractor. And if you're going to go through one of these brokers, be careful, because you might be paying $5 for what you could have paid $1 for, and they might be using dodgy operators along the way. So in my personal life mission is to get all these great facilities recognized, used, and the supply chain harnessed, and all these great operators, once again, use. We've got great fleet out there. And quite often, another tip I can give you, if you're looking at radioactive waste and if you're looking at some of the more specialized waste, to go straight to the facility. So if I was looking at radiation waste, if I'm allowed to say this, I would go to TELUS and speak to the guys there. They can organize your permit. They're not going to let it go wrong because it looks bad on them. Same as if you're looking at the hydrocarbon, you go to Nor Oil Soil, the GRRs, the Ren Oils. Those guys are experts in their field. They will not lead you astray. Geocycle, Mary and her crew in Geocycle and Cement Australia will not lead you astray because they need to get the correct facilities, but they'll also help you organize the right permits if you need any help. So having direct access to these waste facilities does help the operator. And in a project management capacity, if you can get that information straight up, that can inform your project management, that can inform your hazard, that can inform your HAZOB, and your entire system and process can be planned from point A to go through all your decision review gates to the end product. And I think that is just invaluable for me.
And again, that really points to, the industry stepping up, the industry wanting to do the right thing. And really, we hope that industry broadly, from the title holders right throughout the supply chain, get a lot of value out of the work that we're doing. And really that exploration of the ideas brings us to the end of our chat about decommissioning waste management. It only remains for me to thank once again Kim Horwood, sharing your experience and insights today.
Thank you for having me, Shaun and CODA.
Thank you everybody for listening.